Ambassador Zixthera's 6 eyes bulged in horror as the sensor array blared urgent warnings. The diplomatic meeting point, once empty space, now teemed with massive human vessels materializing from hyperspace jumps. Each ship bristled with what appeared to be weapon systems, their hulls scared and utilitarian. Emergency protocols. Now, Zixthera shrieked, mandibles clicking frantically. They'd brought a war fleet to a peace conference. The bridge of the Concord diplomatic vessel erupted into controlled chaos. Defense screens hummed to life as communication officers broadcast distress signals across subspace channels. In the Galactic Concord's 5,000 years of diplomatic history, no species had ever arrived for first contact negotiations with military vessels. Senior advisor Krelvox approached the ambassador, her normally iridescent skin now pale with concern. The database contains minimal information on humans. They achieved faster-than-light capability, only 37 standard cycles ago. Unprecedented development speed. Their acceleration through technological phases should have been our first warning. Zixthera hissed. Upper limbs gesturing at the tactical display were 12. No 14. Human ships now appeared. Species that develop so rapidly rarely develop the philosophical maturity to manage their capabilities responsibly. The vessel shuddered slightly as the defensive systems reached full power. The chief security officer, a methane-breathing Hathori, encased in an environmental suit, reported from his station. Ambassador, our shields cannot withstand concentrated fire from that many vessels. Preliminary scans suggest their weapons technology exceeds our defensive capabilities by approximately 30%. Incoming transmission from the human flagship, announced the communications officer, voice trembling. Zixthera straightened his ceremonial robes, preparing for what might be his final diplomatic act. Display the message. The central screen flickered to life, revealing a human female in a crisp dark uniform, adorned with gleaming insignia. Her expression appeared calm, even friendly. Ambassador Zixthera, I am Admiral Helena Chen of the United Earth Navy. On behalf of humanity, I extend greetings and anticipation for productive discussions. Is everything all right? Your vessel's energy signature suggests defensive posturing. The translator rendered her words perfectly into standard Concord language, but the meaning behind them confused Zixthera. How could she inquire about their status while surrounded by such overwhelming firepower? Was this some form of psychological warfare, feigning concern while preparing to strike? Admiral Chen, Zixthera responded, working to keep his voice steady. Your arrival with a military fleet constitutes a severe violation of Concord diplomatic protocols. We interpret this as a hostile action and have notified Concord Central Command. The human's expression changed, showing what the ambassador's xenopsychology training suggested was genuine confusion. Military fleet. Ambassador, there must be a misunderstanding. This is a standard diplomatic mission configuration for deep space encounters. Krulvox leaned close to Zixthera's communication pickup. They claim this is standard. Scans show weapon emplacements on all vessels, Admiral. The human nodded calmly. Of course, all United Earth vessels maintain defensive capabilities, particularly in unexplored regions. This is safety protocol, not aggression. Zixthera exchanged baffled glances with his senior staff. In Concord philosophy, weapons were displayed only when intended for use. The concept of armed diplomacy was not merely foreign, it was fundamentally contradictory. The largest vessel is moving, warned the security officer, pointing to the tactical display where the human flagship had indeed begun a slow approach. Hold position. Zixthera transmitted urgently. Any closer approach will be considered aggressive action. Admiral Chen immediately halted her vessel's movement. Ambassador, I propose a compromise. If you're uncomfortable with our standard formation, we can establish a meeting point equidistant between our vessels. Perhaps a small delegation from each side, in unarmed shuttles. Before Zixthera could respond, the sensor officer interrupted with fresh alarm. New contacts detected. 3 vessels decloaking at bearing 157 Mark 82. They're not human design. The tactical display revealed sleek, predatory ships materializing from stealth mode, their energy signatures pulsing with weapon charging sequences. They had positioned themselves perfectly behind the Concorde vessel, using it as a shield against the human fleet. The bridge fell silent as a new transmission request flashed on the communications panel. The origin identifier was 1-6 Thera, recognized with sinking dread. Vexnar Raiders, the most notorious pirates in the sector. Admiral Chen watched with growing concern as the alien diplomat's multiple eyes darted nervously between unseen advisors off-screen. The translator program struggled to keep pace with the rapid clicking sounds that punctuated the ambassador's speech. Admiral Chen, your arrival with combat vessels constitutes a severe breach of diplomatic protocol. We interpret this as a hostile action. Chen's second-in-command, Commander Reyes, leaned close. They think we're threatening them. Chen nodded slightly. Ambassador, there seems to be a misunderstanding. This isn't an aggressive posture but standard human travel procedure. After the Proxima Centauri disaster claimed 40,000 lives, our safety regulations mandate comprehensive fleet support for all deep space missions. The alien's head tilted at an uncomfortable angle. You require military escorts for diplomacy. These aren't escorts, Chen explained patiently. Each vessel serves specific functions: medical, scientific, engineering, and yes, defense. We navigate space as a community, not as isolated individuals. The tension visibly remained in the ambassador's posture. The Concorde sees displays of military capability as intent to use such capability. Chen's diplomatic advisor, Dr. Lai, whispered urgently, cultural impasse. Their history suggests no concept of deterrence theory. Before Chen could formulate a response that might bridge this philosophical gap, Lieutenant Commander Okafor at the tactical station called out, Admiral, we have 3 new contacts. They just decloaked behind the Concorde vessel. The bridge crew snapped to alert status as the main display shifted to show 3 sleek, predatory vessels positioning themselves strategically, using the Concorde diplomatic ship as a shield against the human fleet. Full sensor sweep, Chen ordered. Tactical assessment. Unknown design, Admiral, reported the tactical officer. Energy signatures suggest weapons charging. They're positioning for an attack on the Concorde vessel while using it as cover from our weapons arcs. Dr. Li's expression darkened. Pirates or opportunists. They likely monitored our communications and detected the cultural standoff. The communications officer raised her hand. Admiral, the Concorde vessel is broadcasting a distress signal. Ambassador Zix Thera is requesting to speak with you urgently. Chen nodded. On screen, the alien diplomat appeared, his earlier diplomatic restraint replaced by unmistakable fear. Admiral Chen, we face a grave threat. These are Vexnar Raiders, notorious pirates who specifically target diplomatic vessels for their technology and specimens. Specimens, Commander Reyes questioned quietly. They mean captives, Dr. Lai clarified grimly. For research, ransom, or worse. Chen's decision was immediate. Ambassador Zix Thera, regardless of our cultural differences, the United Earth Navy will not permit an attack on a diplomatic vessel. We're moving to defensive positions. Relief flooded the alien's features. Our defensive capabilities are minimal by design. Concorde philosophy holds that diplomats should carry no means to harm others. A noble sentiment, Chen acknowledged, but perhaps impractical in regions with actors who don't share your values. Commander Reyes, coordinate a defensive formation. Princeton and Horizon, move to positions to protect the Concorde vessel without threatening the newcomers yet. As orders spread through the human fleet, the vessels moved with practiced precision. 2 smaller, faster ships glided into positions that would allow them to intercept attacks aimed at the Concorde diplomat, while the remainder of the fleet spread into a loose formation that maintained multiple firing solutions on the raiders without appearing overtly aggressive. New transmission coming in. announced the communications officer. From the lead raider vessel, the view screen shifted to display a being superficially similar to Ambassador Zix, but with notable differences. Where the ambassador's features suggested a species evolved for intellect and social cooperation, this being displayed the adaptations of an apex predator: sharpened mandibles, reinforced exoskeletal plates, and eyes modified for tracking movement rather than discerning detail. Attention human vessels. The raider captain's translated voice carried artificial pleasantness that failed to mask underlying menace. This interaction concerns the Concord only. Their vessel has violated territorial agreements by entering this sector without proper authorization. We are simply enforcing local regulations. Chen recognized the transparent lie immediately. Ambassador Zix's panicked reaction had clearly identified these newcomers as pirates, not law enforcement. This is Admiral Helena Chen of the United Earth Navy. We're engaged in diplomatic discussions with the Concord representatives. If there are jurisdictional concerns, we welcome the opportunity to discuss them. After all weapons systems are powered down. The raider captain's mandibles clicked in what the translation software interpreted as amusement. Humans are new to this region. You have no standing in our arrangement with the Concord. Withdraw your vessels now, and we ensure your safe passage out of this sector. Dr. Lai leaned closer to Chen. They're trying to isolate the Concord ship. Classic divide and conquer. Chen nodded subtly, then addressed the raider directly. I'm afraid that's not possible. As I mentioned, we're in the middle of diplomatic proceedings with Ambassador Zix's delegation. Perhaps you could return in. Enough delays, interrupted the raider captain. You have 30 seconds to withdraw before we consider your presence hostile interference. As the transmission cut, Commander Reyes moved to Chen's side. Orders, Admiral. Chen's expression hardened. Battle stations. All vessels prepare defensive countermeasures. Nobody fires unless fired upon, but make absolutely certain we're ready when that happens. The sleek, predatory ships that emerged from hyperspace moved with practiced precision, immediately targeting the isolated Concord diplomatic vessel. Their energy signatures matched no known civilization in human records. Vexnar raiders. Ambassador Zix's voice cracked with genuine terror. They target diplomatic meetings specifically. Chen assessed the situation in seconds. Defensive Formation Delta. Princeton and Wellington moved to shield the Concord vessel. Kagoshima, prepare medical teams. All ships, defensive systems only until we understand the situation. The human fleet responded with remarkable coordination, larger vessels positioning themselves to absorb potential attacks, while smaller, faster ships established a perimeter. On the bridge of the Concord vessel, Zix watched in astonishment as the human ships that had triggered such alarm minutes before now maneuvered to protect his fragile diplomatic craft. Their movements are precise, observed Senior Advisor Krelvox, her voice barely audible over the alarm systems. Almost as if they've practiced this specific scenario. Impossible, replied the security officer. They couldn't have anticipated the Vexnar. Not specifically, Zix realized, mandibles clicking thoughtfully despite his fear, but they prepared for the possibility of having to defend an ally. Their standard diplomatic formation suddenly makes a terrible kind of sense. The lead raider ship transmitted on an open frequency. Surrender the Concord vessel and depart, humans. This dispute predates your presence in this sector. The message echoed through both the Concord and human communication systems. Zix. Thera felt his exoskeleton tighten with dread. In his 5 decades of diplomatic service, he had heard stories of colleagues who disappeared during missions, their vessels later found stripped of technology and life. The Concord Council had dismissed these incidents as unfortunate accidents or the work of unknown cosmic phenomena. Admiral. Zix transmitted directly to the human flagship. The Vexnar target diplomatic ships because our defensive capabilities are minimal by design. They will strip our vessel for technology and sell my delegation into servitude. On the bridge of her vessel, Admiral Chen's expression hardened as she processed this information. Not today, they won't. She opened a direct channel to the Raider flagship. This is Admiral Helena Chen of the United Earth Navy. The Concord vessel is under our protection. Withdraw immediately. The response came swiftly. Humans have no standing in this region. Final warning. Depart or be destroyed. Chen glanced at her tactical display, where Commander Reyes had already mapped firing solutions that would disable rather than destroy the raiders. Ambassador Zix Thera, Chen transmitted. We're about to demonstrate why humans travel prepared. I recommend your crews secure themselves. The ambassador could scarcely believe what was happening. The same military capability that had terrified him upon the humans' arrival now represented his only chance of survival. Acknowledged, Admiral, he responded, signaling his crew to engage emergency restraint protocols. Chen turned to her weapons officer. Target engines and weapon systems only. Show them exactly why humans travel prepared. The first barrage from the human vessels took the Vexnar completely by surprise. Accustomed to confronting defenseless diplomatic ships, they had never developed tactics for engaging an actual combat-ready fleet. Precision energy beams lanced out from 3 human ships simultaneously, striking the lead raider's propulsion and weapons with surgical accuracy. The effect was immediate. The pirate vessel listed to one side, emergency systems visibly engaging as sections of its hull went dark. First target neutralized, reported the tactical officer. No life support breaches detected. Second vessel attempting evasive maneuvers, Commander Reyes observed. They're trying to circle behind the Wellington. Chen nodded. Predictable. Olympus and Sentinel. Intercept pattern Bravo 6. The smaller, nimbler human ships broke formation with stunning acceleration, cutting off the raiders' attempted flanking maneuver. A coordinated series of short, precise bursts disabled the second vessel's main drives without destroying it completely. On the Concord ship, Zix Thera and his crew watched in stunned silence. The tactical efficiency of the human response defied everything they had been taught about military engagements. There was no unnecessary destruction, no collateral damage, just the methodical neutralization of threats. They fight like they're performing surgery, whispered Krelvox, watching the tactical display with wide eyes. The third and largest Vexnar vessel, seeing its companions disabled so efficiently, hesitated visibly. Its energy signature fluctuated as weapons charge and then powered down repeatedly, the unmistakable sign of a commander reconsidering options. The last raider is reassessing, Chen observed. Let's help them make the right decision. Target their weapons systems but hold fire. Open a channel. The communications officer nodded. Channel open, Admiral. Attention remaining Vexnar vessel, Chen stated calmly. Your companions are disabled but their crews are alive. You have exactly 30 seconds to power down all systems and prepare to be boarded, or you will join them. A tense silence filled both bridges as they awaited the response. Finally, the energy signatures of the third raider began to diminish as systems powered down one by one. They're surrendering, Admiral, reported Commander Reyes, not bothering to hide the hint of surprise in his voice. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Sometimes the most convincing argument is a practical demonstration. Prepare boarding teams. The first Vexnar ship never saw the precision strike coming. A synchronized barrage from 3 human vessels targeted its weapon systems and engines with surgical accuracy, leaving the pirate craft dead in space without breaching its life support sectors. Ambassador Zix Thera watched in stunned silence from the bridge of his vessel as the human fleet executed combat maneuvers with what appeared to be practiced ease. Their formation never exposed the Concord ship to danger, yet maintained overwhelming offensive capability. Second Vexnar vessel attempting to flank, targeting our starboard section, reported Commander Reyes. Constellation and Artemis, intercept and disable, Chen ordered calmly. Non-lethal measures where possible. The speed of the human response left the second raider with little opportunity to adjust. Precision strikes disabled its primary systems, leaving it tumbling helplessly in space. Admiral Chen. Zixthera transmitted, his voice steadier now that the immediate danger had passed. I request permission to observe your boarding operations. A brief pause followed before Chen responded. Ambassador, I must caution that boarding potentially hostile vessels involves risk. I understand, but I need to see. His mandibles clicked hesitantly. I need to understand the species that just saved mine. Chen considered this request thoughtfully. Very well. A security team will escort you aboard our command shuttle. Commander Rice will oversee the operation personally. An hour later, Zixthera found himself aboard a human military transport approaching the disabled lead raider. The vessel's interior surprised him. Functional but comfortable, with safety systems far more comprehensive than he had expected from a supposedly aggressive species. We're boarding through their secondary airlock, explained Commander Reyes. Our scans indicate 14 life signs aboard, all in stable condition. You monitored their life signs during the attack? Zixthera asked, surprised. Of course, Reyes replied as if this were obvious. Tactical systems automatically track all biological signatures during engagement. Preservation of life is a primary directive when possible. The boarding proved methodical and efficient. Human security personnel moved with disciplined coordination, securing sections of the vessel systematically. Most surprising to Zixthera was the immediate deployment of medical personnel who treated injured Vexnar regardless of their status. One raider, nursing a wound from falling debris during the attack, snarled something the translator rendered as a vulgar threat. The human medic treating him simply continued working, unmoved by the hostility. Why treat those who just tried to kill you? Zixthera asked the nearest officer. They're no longer combatants, replied the human simply. Under both space law and our military code, they're entitled to medical treatment once neutralized. This concept seemed to genuinely perplex the ambassador. The strong caring for the defeated serves no obvious tactical advantage. Commander Reyes, overseeing the securing of the bridge, overheard the comment. Doesn't it? How we treat prisoners communicates our values more clearly than any diplomatic statement. Besides, cruelty reflects weakness of character, not strength of position. They reached the raider vessel's command center where security teams were systematically downloading the ship's databases. A junior officer approached with a data tablet. Commander, we found something concerning, she reported. These raiders have attacked 7 Concord diplomatic missions in the past year alone. Their database includes detailed specifications of Concord ships and patrol schedules. Reyes frowned, turning to Zixthera. Ambassador, it appears these raids aren't random opportunities, but targeted operations with inside information. The ambassador's multiple eyes blinked in different patterns, indicating deep distress. Impossible. The Concord has maintained peaceful relations with all known species for millennia. Perhaps not all species, Reyes suggested carefully. Or perhaps not all factions within known species. The captured Vexnar captain, secured in a restraint chair on the bridge, made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. The noble Concord, so proud of their transparency. Did you never wonder why your diplomatic vessels disappear so regularly in certain sectors? Zixthera approached the captive, setting aside diplomatic protocol. Explain yourself. The raider's mandibles clicked in a pattern suggesting amusement. Your predictability is your weakness. Unarmed vessels, traveling alone, following published routes. For decades we've harvested your technology and other resources. Other resources? Reyes questioned sharply. Ask your Concord masters about their missing diplomats. The raider hissed. Ask them about the market value of certain exotic biological specimens. Ask them about the secrets they've paid to keep hidden. Zixthera recoiled physically. This is misinformation. The Concord would never. The Concord leadership pays handsomely to recover their people quietly, interrupted the pirate. They maintain the illusion of a perfect, peaceful galaxy by burying incidents like ours. Quite profitable for all parties, until you humans interfered. Commander Reyes studied the alien ambassador's reaction carefully. The obvious distress in Zixthera's posture suggested this information was as shocking to him as it was to the humans. "We need to report this to Admiral Chen immediately," Reyes decided. "And Ambassador, you may need to have a difficult conversation with your superiors." Zixthera's normally vibrant coloration had faded to a dull gray. "Yes, I believe I do." Ambassador Zixthera requested, and received, permission to observe the human boarding operation on the disabled Vexnar vessels. What he witnessed challenged every assumption he'd made about these strange, powerful newcomers. The human security teams moved with disciplined efficiency, securing the pirate crews without unnecessary force. Most surprising to Zixthera was the immediate deployment of medical personnel who treated injured Vexnar without distinction between those who had surrendered peacefully and those who had resisted. "Your medics helped those who just tried to destroy your ships," Zixthera observed as he followed Admiral Chen through the secured corridors of the lead raider vessel. "Of course," Chen replied simply. "They're no longer combatants but prisoners under our protection." Back on the human flagship, the secured communication chamber hummed with tension. Ambassador Zixthera faced a quantum entanglement connection to the Concord High Council. The faces of 12 representatives from different member species regarded him with expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed hostility. "These accusations are grave," stated High Counselor Vrolnox, whose crystalline form shimmered with waves of color indicating emotional distress. "The suggestion that Concord diplomatic missions have been systematically targeted with inside information strikes at our foundational security. The evidence appears substantial, Counselor," Zixthera responded, struggling to maintain diplomatic composure. The human security teams recovered detailed schedules for upcoming diplomatic missions, including security protocols and delegation compositions. Counselor Trasmol, a methane-breathing entity contained within a specialized environment suit, spoke next. "More concerning is your evident trust in these humans. You initially contacted us in panic at their military presence, yet now present their findings as fact." "I have witnessed their actions firsthand, Counselor," Zixthera countered. "They used their military capability to protect our vessel rather than threaten it. Their combat approach prioritized disabling threats while minimizing casualties." Another counselor leaned forward, her insectoid features arranged in what Zixthera recognized as an expression of skepticism. "The evidence from the raider vessel suggests knowledge of Concord operations that could only come from within our organization. This is unprecedented." "With respect, Counselor," Zixthera ventured carefully, "perhaps it is not entirely unprecedented. The raider captain suggested that previous incidents have been managed quietly. Is there truth to this claim?" A heavy silence fell over the communication. Finally, High Counselor Vrolnox spoke, his crystalline form now pulsing with dark bands of color. "Ambassador, you overstep your authority. The security of the Concord occasionally requires discretion. Certain incidents are handled at the highest levels to prevent unnecessary panic among member species." Zixthera felt his mandibles tighten with shock. You knew diplomats were being targeted and said nothing. You continued sending unarmed vessels into dangerous regions." "We maintain the peace," Vrolnox stated flatly. "Sometimes this requires difficult compromises." "Compromises?" Zixthera could barely contain his outrage. "My crew and I would have been captured or killed if not for the human intervention." "An unfortunate, but statistically rare outcome," another counselor interjected. "The resource allocation required to properly arm diplomatic vessels would undermine our foundational principles of peaceful engagement." Zixthera stared at the council members in disbelief. The organization he had served faithfully for decades had knowingly placed him and countless others at risk, all to maintain an illusion of perfect harmony. "Admiral Chen has requested a formal meeting with the council," he stated, setting aside his personal feelings. "Given the circumstances, I strongly recommend you accept." After a brief private consultation among the counselors, Vrolnox responded, We will grant this request. The humans have demonstrated both capability and a certain moral clarity that warrants further discussion. Ambassador, you will facilitate this meeting." When the communication ended, Zixthera remained in the chamber alone, his thoughts in turmoil. Outside, he knew Admiral Chen waited patiently for his report. How could he explain to this human commander that the peaceful utopia the Concord presented to the galaxy was built partly on sacrificed diplomats and quiet ransoms? How could he reconcile his lifetime of service with this new understanding? The door slid open, and Chen entered with respectful quietness. "Ambassador, are you all right?" Zixthera's exoskeleton had faded to a dull gray, a physiological response to extreme stress that his species couldn't control. "The Council has agreed to meet with you, Admiral." They also partially confirmed the raider captain's claims. Chen nodded slowly, processing this information without visible judgment. Political systems are rarely as perfect as they appear from outside. Even Earth's united government has its compromises and dark corners. How do you maintain faith in such institutions when you discover their flaws? Zixthera asked, the question far more personal than diplomatic. "We don't expect perfection," Chen replied thoughtfully. "We expect effort, adaptation, and the courage to confront mistakes. The strongest systems aren't those without flaws, but those capable of acknowledging and correcting them." The ambassador considered this perspective. The Concord has maintained peace among dozens of species for millennia. Perhaps I should not judge them too harshly for the methods. Peace built on hidden sacrifices may be necessary sometimes, Chen acknowledged. But now that we know the truth, we have an opportunity to find a better way forward, together. The secured communication chamber aboard the human flagship buzzed with tension as Ambassador Zixthera faced the Concord High Council via quantum entanglement link. The 12 elder representatives of different member species displayed varying degrees of agitation at his report. "These accusations are troubling," stated High Counselor Vrlnox, whose crystalline form shimmered with waves of color indicating emotional distress. "The suggestion of information leaks regarding diplomatic missions strikes at the foundation of Concord security protocols. The evidence appears substantial," Zixthera responded. The human security teams recovered detailed schedules for upcoming diplomatic missions, including security arrangements and delegation compositions. Another counselor, a methane-breathing entity contained within a specialized environment suit, spoke next. "More concerning is your report on human military capabilities. You initially contacted us in panic at their show of force, yet now suggest they saved your delegation." "Both statements are accurate, Counselor," Zixthera admitted. "Their approach to interstellar travel, armed yet peaceful, powerful yet restrained, contradicts our fundamental assumptions about species development." Admiral Chen, invited to join the latter portion of the discussion, entered the chamber with respectful formality. The human carried no weapons and wore a simplified dress uniform, as Zixthera had suggested would be appropriate. "Admiral," Vrlnox acknowledged, "the Concord extends gratitude for your protection of our diplomatic vessel. However, we must understand, is your fleet's configuration typical of human expeditions, or was this arrangement specifically assembled to impress or intimidate the Concord?" Chen's response came without hesitation. "High Counselor, every human deep space mission follows similar protocols. 1,000 years of our history taught us that isolation equals vulnerability. We travel prepared not because we expect conflict, but because we value each human life too highly to risk it through inadequate preparation." "An admirable sentiment," replied a counselor whose translucent body pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. "Yet our records indicate your species engaged in numerous internal conflicts before achieving unity. How do we reconcile your warlike past with your claims of peaceful intent?" Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Counselor, we don't deny our history. Humans fought each other for resources, ideology, territory, sometimes for reasons that seem incomprehensible even to us now. But these conflicts taught us valuable lessons. What lessons could justify maintaining such military capability?" demanded another counselor. That peace must be actively maintained, not merely assumed, Chen replied. That showing strength while exercising restraint creates more stable outcomes than vulnerability alone. That preparation prevents more conflicts than it provokes. The chamber fell silent as the council processed this philosophy, one fundamentally different from Concord doctrine, yet clearly effective in practical application. Zixthera seized the moment to address a critical question. Counselors, the evidence from the raider vessels suggests systematic targeting of our diplomatic missions with inside information. This requires investigation. High Counselor Vrelnox's crystalline form darkened momentarily. Such matters are handled through appropriate internal security channels, Ambassador. With respect, Chen interjected carefully. The raiders specifically mentioned ransoms paid and diplomats lost. If such attacks have occurred regularly, perhaps alternative approaches deserve consideration. The council members exchanged glances that even the advanced translation systems couldn't fully interpret. Finally, an elder counselor whose species resembled something between a mantis and a tree spoke slowly. For 8,000 cycles, the Concord has maintained peace through principles of transparency, vulnerability, and non-aggression. Our diplomatic vessels carry no weapons because we believe displaying arms invites their use. We travel alone to demonstrate trust. Chen nodded respectfully. A noble philosophy, counselor, and one that clearly served the Concord well in establishing peace among its members. But perhaps in dealing with forces outside your confederation, different approaches might complement your existing methods. You suggest we should arm our vessels? Asked Vrelnox, colors shifting in what appeared to be alarm. I suggest examining the full range of options between complete vulnerability and military aggression, Chen clarified. Security doesn't always require weapons. Sometimes it means traveling in groups, varying routes, improving communication protocols, or establishing rapid response capabilities. Another council member leaned forward. Admiral, while your intervention protected Ambassador Zixthera's delegation, it also demonstrated overwhelming military power in a region where the Concord has worked for millennia to reduce armed presence. I understand your concern, Chen acknowledged. Humanity doesn't wish to disrupt the peace you've built. We seek to join and contribute to it, bringing our unique perspective as you've brought yours. Zixthera, watching the exchange, noted the subtle shift in the council's collective posture. What had begun as skepticism was evolving into cautious interest. Perhaps, suggested Vrelnox, colors now stabilizing into thoughtful patterns, there is wisdom in considering alternative approaches to maintaining peace. Ambassador Zixthera, you have observed human methods firsthand. What is your assessment? Zixthera considered his response carefully, aware that his words might shape the relationship between humans and the Concord for generations to come. I believe, he began deliberately, that the human philosophy of peace through strength contains elements worth studying. Their response to the raiders demonstrated both formidable capability and remarkable restraint. Perhaps most importantly, they risked their own safety to protect those who had initially feared them. The council chambers fell into contemplative silence. The next 2 weeks transformed what had begun as a standard diplomatic mission into an unprecedented cultural exchange. With the initial crisis resolved and the Vexnar prisoners transferred to Concord custody, both sides cautiously opened their ships to limited delegation visits. Dr. Samira Okafor, the fleet's cultural anthropologist, found herself suddenly in high demand. Their entire social structure, she explained during a briefing with Admiral Chen, revolves around consensus and harmony. Military conflict between Concord member species ended some 50,000 years ago, so long that the concept of deterrence has literally vanished from their languages, which explains their panic at our arrival, Chen noted. They interpreted our capabilities as intent. Precisely. To them, bringing weapons to a diplomatic meeting would be like bringing poison to a dinner party on Earth, an unmistakable signal of hostile intent. Meanwhile, Concord scientists and diplomats explored the human vessels with equal fascination. The medical ship, with its advanced trauma facilities, particularly impressed the visitors. One Concord physician, a six-limbed amphibious being, spent hours examining human emergency response protocols. Your species prepares extensively for disasters that may never occur, she observed to the chief medical officer. We find this simultaneously admirable and perplexing. The human doctor smiled. We have a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Ambassador Zixthera, initially the most alarmed by human military capability, gradually became their strongest advocate within the Concord delegation. The turning point came during a private conversation with Admiral Chen in the ship's arboretum, a space designed to remind the crew of Earth. Your species frightens mine, Zixthera admitted, watching a small hummingbird drone pollinate the flowering plants. Not merely your weapons, but your readiness to use them precisely and without hesitation. Yet we use them to protect, not conquer, Chen pointed out. That distinction makes you more unpredictable, not less, the ambassador replied. But perhaps unpredictability has value in a galaxy that has grown too comfortable with predictable responses. Chen studied the alien diplomat thoughtfully. Ambassador, may I ask a personal question? Of course, Admiral. How has your view of the Concord changed since discovering their handling of previous raider attacks? Zixthera's exoskeleton darkened momentarily, the equivalent of a human frown. I have served the Concord for my entire career, believing absolutely in our principles of transparency and peaceful cooperation. Learning that our leadership concealed threats and abandoned diplomats. It has been difficult. Institutions often fall short of their ideals, Chen offered. That doesn't invalidate the ideals themselves. A wise perspective, Zixthera acknowledged. I find myself questioning not our fundamental principles, but our methods of implementing them. Perhaps maintaining peace requires more adaptability than we have shown. Later that day, in the human flagship's main conference room, teams from both species gathered to share knowledge more formally. Dr. Okafor organized a presentation on human history, showing humanity's journey from tribal warfare to unified space exploration, a path marked by repeated cycles of conflict and cooperation. We don't hide our violent history, she explained to the fascinated Concord delegates. We study it to avoid repeating past mistakes. Our current protocols emerged from painful lessons. Commander Rice added, our ancestors learned that peace isn't merely the absence of conflict. It's the presence of justice and security for all parties. In return, Concord philosophers shared their society's emphasis on consensus and non-confrontation. Zixthera's staff demonstrated elegant diplomatic rituals designed to diffuse tension through symbolic vulnerability, protocols that had worked well among known species but proved disastrous with opportunistic pirates. Our methods evolved in a context where all parties genuinely desired harmony, explained Senior Advisor Krelvox. They functioned beautifully within that framework. But poorly outside it, Zixthera added with newfound candor. Perhaps the strongest approach combines your preparedness with our collaborative instincts. As the exchange continued, practical cooperation emerged alongside philosophical discussion. Human security officers trained with Concord peacekeepers, exchanging tactics and perspectives. Concord diplomats studied human negotiation techniques that integrated firmness with flexibility. The most significant breakthrough came when High Counselor Vril Knox himself arrived aboard the human flagship, an unprecedented honor. His crystalline form radiated patterns of light that the translation software interpreted as cautious optimism. After reviewing Ambassador Zixthera's reports and the evidence from the raider vessels, Vril Knox announced, the Council has voted to establish a Joint Security Commission to explore new protocols for diplomatic missions in contested regions. Chen recognized the significance of this concession from a civilization that had maintained unchanged diplomatic procedures for millennia. The United Earth government welcomes this opportunity, Counselor. We believe our approaches can complement each other effectively. Indeed, Vril Knox agreed, his crystalline structure shimmering with more vibrant colors. Your demonstration of strength, tempered by restraint, has impressed even our most conservative members. We have maintained peace through vulnerability, which served well among those who share our values. But perhaps in dealing with those who do not, your approach offers valuable alternatives. As the meeting concluded, Zixthera found himself standing between these two very different leaders, one crystalline and ancient, representing a civilization that had mastered the art of peace, the other human and comparatively young, from a species that had mastered the science of security. Perhaps, he suggested thoughtfully, the strongest position combines both philosophies, the wisdom to seek harmony and the strength to defend it when necessary. 6 months after the fateful first meeting, a formal ceremony marked humanity's conditional acceptance into the Galactic Concord. The event took place in neutral space, with representatives from 27 species in attendance. The ceremony featured an unprecedented sight, a joint fleet formation with alternating human and Concord vessels, each maintaining their distinct approaches while operating in harmonious coordination. The human ships remained robust and battle-ready, the Concord vessels elegant and communication-focused. Together, they created a display of complementary strength that impressed even the most skeptical observers. High Counselor Verlinox and Admiral Chen signed the historic agreement establishing the new Terran Protocol for diplomatic security, a framework that would transform Concord operations across the galaxy. Today marks not just the addition of humanity to our community, Verlinox announced, his crystalline form glowing with vibrant patterns of light, but the evolution of the Concord itself. We have learned that true peace requires both the wisdom to seek harmony and the strength to defend it. The Great Assembly Hall, constructed specifically for this ceremony aboard a massive Concord administrative vessel, hummed with the sounds of diverse species communicating in their native languages. Translators worked continuously, converting the proceedings into dozens of different formats: auditory, visual, chemical, and even gravitational for certain exotic member species. Ambassador Zixthera stood at the center podium, no longer the frightened diplomat who had once panicked at the sight of human vessels. His exoskeleton gleamed with the vibrant colors of confidence and purpose. The Terran Protocol represents a fundamental shift in our approach to maintaining peace, he explained to the assembled delegates. For 50 millennia, the Concord has championed transparency and vulnerability as the foundations of diplomacy. These principles remain at our core. He gestured toward the human delegation. Our new allies have shown us that these values can be complemented by prudent preparation and coordinated protection. In regions where all parties share our commitment to peaceful resolution, we will continue our traditional approaches. In contested areas, joint human Concord security details will ensure the safety of our diplomatic missions. Admiral Chen stepped forward when invited. Her dress uniform gleamed with the formal decorations of her service, yet she carried no visible weapons, a deliberate choice that many Concord representatives noted with approval. Humanity comes to the Concord with humility and respect, she stated. We recognize the extraordinary achievement your civilization represents. 50,000 years of maintained peace among diverse species is unprecedented in our history. She paused, looking across the assembled delegates. But we also come with the conviction that lasting peace must be actively protected, not through aggression or dominance, but through preparation, coordination, and the readiness to defend our shared values when necessary. The signing ceremony proceeded with elaborate ritual. Each member species contributed an element according to their cultural traditions: crystalline formations from Verlinox's people, intricate sound patterns from auditory species, complex molecular compositions from chemical communicators. The human contribution was simple yet profound. A small olive branch, the ancient earth symbol of peace, preserved in transparent aluminum. Admiral Chen placed it carefully among the other symbolic offerings. On Earth, this represents peace achieved after conflict, she explained. A reminder that harmony is not the natural state of the universe, but something we must continuously work to create and maintain. As the formal proceedings concluded, Ambassador Zixthera, now appointed as permanent liaison to Earth, found himself standing beside Commander Reyes, watching the combined fleet maneuvers through the Great Observation Dome. 6 months ago, The sight of your vessels threw me into panic, Zixthera admitted. Now I find their presence reassuring. Evolution works in strange ways, Commander. Reyes smiled. Not so strange, Ambassador. We feared what we didn't understand about each other. Fear became knowledge, knowledge became respect, and respect has become alliance. And perhaps in time, friendship, added Zixthera. In the space beyond the window, a small Concord diplomatic vessel prepared to depart for a mission to a contested region. For the first time in Concord history, it traveled with escorts. 2 human vessels positioned discreetly at a respectful distance, visible enough to deter potential threats but maintaining the Concord ship's primacy. The ships that had once caused an ambassador's panic now formed a protective constellation around Concord diplomacy, a living symbol of humanity's unique contribution to galactic peace, not just the wisdom to seek harmony, but the strength and readiness to defend it. As the 3 vessels accelerated into hyperspace, Zixthera felt a profound sense of optimism. The universe remained dangerous and unpredictable, but the combined approaches of human preparedness and Concord diplomacy created something stronger than either civilization could achieve alone. Peace through understanding, harmony through strength, protection through presence. The Terran Protocol had begun.